Can you tell me a little bit about what you were like as a child?
I can try, but I don't really remember much of my childhood.
Okay, so what do you remember?
Well, I've written jokes about a lot of stuff that I remember.
Okay, so tell me a joke.
What?
I think that your brain learned to express your thoughts and your feelings through your jokes. So tell me a joke.
Like here? Right now?
Unless you have a better idea.
I might.
When I was 26 years old, I went to therapy for the first time. And it took me that long because I was born and raised in Florida. And I thought it was illegal. I had no idea. I was also raised to believe that like therapy was for people that were not doing okay, and also that I was doing okay, which is the first joke. I didn't go to therapy until after I moved out to Los Angeles, which I know does not help the stereotype, but it is what happened. It feels like I went out there, I signed a lease, they handed me a key and went, so this is Cindy. Cindy is her real name, by the way. I thought about changing it, and now the cameras are rolling. Before I met with Cindy for the first time, I had to exchange some like really basic information with her. Like I emailed her, told her what my name was, told her what I do for a living, and then I told her I had just moved to Los Angeles after living in Florida for 25 years, and that was gonna be a pretty big talking point. And when I met her for the first time, I told her one story, and she said, "I'm so sorry. I did not want to judge you before I met you, but that is the most Florida thing I have ever heard." That's a real quote from my actual therapist. And I said, "Oh, Cindy, we've just begun." And much like therapy, we also only have about an hour in here together. So buckle up, we're getting through it all. I think to really understand who I am and how I am as a person, you first got to understand where I come from. And I was born and raised in Daytona Beach, Florida. Silence is good. Thank you. I lived there for 20 years, moved to Orlando for 5, and then I moved out to Los Angeles in the summer of 2021. Yeah, you guys remember time? It very quickly became one of my favorite pastimes to just tell the locals I was from Florida. And then watch them panic, you know? Because it was always something very similar to like, "Oh, Florida." What's that like? Specifically, the question I got a lot was, what's it like to live in Florida during a global pandemic? And at the time, there was always a small voice in the back of my head that wanted to be like, "There's a global pandemic? On our global? Do people know?" But I told him the truth, which is it's exactly what you thought it would be. Nothing changed. We went on lockdown for like 3 hours on a Wednesday. That's it. It was weird to go places and see people care. That was the end of the sentence. I had a show in Arkansas in December of 2020. And when I got there, I got out of my car and I saw people wearing masks and talking about a curfew. And I was like, they care more in Arkansas? They don't even know how to spell Arkansas. And it hit me. I was like, nah, they don't care more in Arkansas. We just fear death a lot less in Florida. That's it. For 2 reasons, by the way. I did the math. Number 1, We just live in constant fear of death. Like, if you went to Florida at any point in known human history and told a bunch of native Floridians that it was dangerous to go outside, we'd all be like, yep. I see you got your brochure. Welcome. Like, these were CDC guidelines for everyone else. They were just survival tactics for us. This is what we learned in elementary school. Like, the first day of third grade, we'd walk in there, they'd be like, don't talk to strangers and run in zigzags to get away from alligators. That's all you have to do. Some of you chuckled nervously at that. And I do want to take a moment to reassure those of you that don't know that that is a real thing they taught us in elementary school. We ran drills. They opened up the gym, cleared it out, and had us zigzagging for our lives at 6 a.m. This is a real thing. They sat us down like 8 years old, like, what are you gonna need when you're an adult? Math? No. You're gonna learn escape and evasion tactics from an actual dinosaur. He's been here since the Cretaceous period. He's got a bit of a head start. You better learn fast, be fast, or die. We'll teach you math if you make it to 12. Welcome to Florida! There's an entire population of human beings that grew up like that, and people wonder why you can't scare us? I lived there for 25 years. I don't have a fight or flight reflex anymore. It's broke. It's stuck on fight. I'll bite an ankle. I don't give a fuck. Number 2. We only understand danger in terms of like wind speed or bite force. That's it. If you don't lead with one of those, we just get confused and we'll probably shoot it anyway. We already shoot alligators and hurricanes. What's one more, you know? I should explain that. For anybody that doesn't know, during hurricane season, everybody in the state of Florida will get invited to a Facebook event titled something along the lines of like, this Thursday at 3 p.m., we're all gonna line up on the Atlantic coast with anything that shoots. And at 3:15, we will shoot at Irma until she goes away. And then we go. And somehow, that is not the dumb part. The dumb part is the Facebook event gets so much traction that a real-life sheriff has to get on real-life TV, look into a camera, and say, please do not shoot the hurricane. The hurricane will not go away. Your bullets will come back. And that just makes us more excited to go. That is Floridian Russian roulette. That's all you're telling me I get to shoot a gun and get my bullets back? That is a BOGO deal. So I told all that to Cindy. She pulled out a bigger notebook. She said, oh, no, okay. What were you like as a child? I was like, oh, I'm so glad you asked. I was an outdoor cat. I didn't mean that like the 80s way. I mean, I lived primarily outdoors, and I would bring animals back to my front step to teach my parents how to hunt for themselves, you know? And this is a real thing that I did as a child, and you can't make fun of me for it, because I'm over it. But it's also a thing that all Floridian children did, and if you tell yourself this isn't true, you're lying. We would chase down and catch lizards and have them bite onto our earlobes and then just dangle. You're all pulling away from me. And you're wrong. Do I have Floridians in here? Yes, okay. Yeah, my section is over here. What was that? It's a no for you? Okay, did you lizard earrings? Yes. Lizard earrings. Lizard earrings. Lizard. You're the weird ones. We had fun. I was 19 years old when I found out that wasn't an everybody thing. I don't want you to hate us. It didn't hurt the lizards to do it, okay? They enjoyed it. I asked, but it feels like just a much more humane and a very Floridian version of like Cruella de Vil. So I didn't want a coat, but I did want a matching set. You know, if you think that's weird, you should have seen our toys. I grew up. I was like a kid in like that time in the late 90s, early 2000s, right before society started to care about whether or not kids lived or died. You guys remember this? There was a very distinct moment. Something changed. Parents just started looking in the back seat before driving away from places. If you didn't laugh at that, I'm so sorry. But there was a good reason I was good at running sports. Survival. Like our best-selling toys at the time were like Razor scooters and sock'em boppers. Which, if you don't know, is a metal ankle breaker and a literal pair of boxing gloves. If you think I'm joking, Google it. The commercial for sock'em boppers was like an 8-year-old boy blowing up a pair of boxing gloves and then beating the ever-living fuck out of his little brother while his parents stood in the hallway smiling. And if you're like, well, at least the dialogue sold it, right? No. There were no words other than a catchy jingle. The catchy jingle went, sock'em boppers, way more fun than a pillow fight. That's it. That's all I remember. And you know why pillow fights weren't as fun? Because they didn't hurt enough. That's what it was. They sold us brightly colored violence, and it worked. Parents bought that shit in droves, brought it home like the Benadryl stopped working. Knock yourselves out, please. And look, I don't want this part of the show to feel like a whole, like, this new generation is never gonna understand. I don't want to do that. I'm not that guy. Things are better now. Things are better now. Do you know what kids have for toys now? Toys. Do you know what we had? Combat! That's what we had! Pain was the promise, and we liked it. Violence was like in our blood. We started inventing games to cause harm to people. I didn't grow up with lawn darts, okay? But I did grow up with a lawn and darts. Do you understand? My brother has a scar on his ankle to this day because I'm a good shot. And this is the wildest thing to me that was totally normal back then. And also, here's the thing about what I'm about to say. I've said this across the country, and everybody has agreed that they want this back for some reason. We were just allowed to leave school. Like the bell would ring, teachers would clock out, we would go. What? If you don't understand why possibly this is not a good thing, real quick, everyone point north. I see a lot of directions and not a whole lot of confidence. That's what I'm seeing right now. Do you think we were better at it as children? No! We had no idea where we were going. The bell rang, teachers clocked out, we wandered. That was it. If we found a dead body, we were friends forever. There's movies about it. We would go anywhere until the streetlights came on. Then we'd run home and hope we got there before the man came on TV going, "Do you know where your children are?" And they would go, "No." This is insane. Why are we happy? Listen. A few years ago, I went with a friend of mine to go pick up his little brother from elementary school. And when I got there, I was both shocked and appalled to find out that I had to walk into a school, look another adult in the face, show identification, and sign the child out. And when I was doing all that, I said, quick question, what the fuck is all this? I didn't have to do this when I was a kid. And then that woman looked me in the eyes and said, yeah, and a lot of kids went missing. Fair point. But we didn't care about kidnappers back then. Nah, we had milk cartons. I should explain that. So if you don't understand that reference, first of all, good for you. For some reason, back in like the mid 1980s, up until like 2006, which is wild, by the way. They thought the best way to find a missing child is that if a kid went missing, a couple weeks later, a black and white picture of his face would show up on your milk carton in the morning and stare at you while you actively did not look for him. Did it work? Ask me if it worked. No, it did not. There's like books and a whole movie about it. Did it make me feel bad? Yeah. Yeah, because I would wake up early before school to watch cartoons, sit there eating cereal like, wow, tricks are for kids. Not that one, but like all the... It's fine, he's not here. Anymore. Now, I don't know if this is going to explain a lot about me or not enough about me, but I went to public school in Florida. All right, Florida section, you know damn well that's not something to cheer for. I don't know what reaction I wanted. Because laughter hurts too. I did a show a couple weeks ago, and someone in the crowd just went, aw. I was like, that's probably the worst noise you can make. Someone apologized to me once. They said, I'm so sorry. And I was like, what? And she said, I'm a public school teacher in Florida. I said, I accept your apology. I was in elementary school during this time period in Florida, and I had an older brother at the time. I still do. I don't know why I said it like that. I still have, same one. He's a year older than me, so he was like the reason teachers always knew who I was before I got to class, that kind of thing. And we were allowed to walk to and from elementary school alone. Our dad did not care about kidnappers either. I think he saw them as like unpaid babysitting. He was a dad of 2 boys in Daytona Beach, Florida. If you asked him, he would have been like, they'll bring him back. So he let us walk to and from school alone as long as we stuck together. That was the only rule he had, was just as long as you guys stick together, you can do this. That was it. One rule, pretty simple rule, pretty fair rule. The one thing that rule has in common with the Confederacy is that it didn't last very long. So if you're not laughing, red flag. But also, I have news for you from 1867. Have you heard? Oh, man, I told that joke in Texas. They loved it! Texas was an independent country for twice as long as the Confederacy was a mistake. So one day, my brother and I are walking home from school, and he stops on the way, and he says, let's go this way, because this way is faster. And I did not believe him. And that is very important to know for the rest of this story. I had a thing about going fast. It's the most childish thing about me. I'm very well aware of that. I like to go fast. I don't know how it happened. I assume I just grew up too close to the Daytona 500. I heard Dale Earnhardt win enough races, something in my bloodstream was like, gotta go now, you know? Like, I did all the running sports except for pretty much anything that involved speed that wasn't on ice, because we didn't have ice. But Like I did in high school, I did cross country, track, and soccer, right? When I was in middle school, I asked my mom if I could ride my bike to school, even though it was 4 miles away and over a bridge. And I asked because I thought I could pedal faster than the bus could take me. That is a real conviction I held in middle school. And when I asked my mom, she looked at me like a crazy person and was like, why would you want to do that? The bus is way easier. And I said, I know, but my way is faster. If you're waiting for a better argument, don't. That's all I had. That's all I needed. She couldn't catch me. And now if you're like, maybe, well, that's fine as long as that ended in like middle school, right? Haha. My entire school career, K through 12, never double-checked an answer on a test. Not once, because I wanted to finish fast so I could take a nap while the other kids were passing. That's what I wanted. And if you were anything like me as a kid, you know you turn that test in just a little too quick, those teachers look at you and go, did you double-check your answers? And I would go, no. Because I was stupid, but I wasn't a liar. And they would go, well, if you double-checked your answers, you'd get a better score. And I would go, oh, I know. But my way is faster. And now if you're like, well, at least that ended after high school, right? Haha. When I was 19, I joined the Army. I found out very quickly the Army likes to keep track of important documentation by hand on loose leaf paper in 3-ring binders. It's a wonder we've won any war ever, by the way. When I saw this, I got so upset that I personally went home to write the code for an app that would help the Army keep track of all their documentation better. When I showed it to my commander, he looked at me and said, Brainard, this is great, but we already have a way. And I said, oh, I know. But my way is faster. So when I was 8 years old, and my brother looked at me and said, let's go this way is faster, and I did not believe him. I had no choice but to prove him wrong. I was Ricky before he bobbied, okay? I was lightning before he McQueened. Does that make sense? What we should have done is we should have gotten a list of all the ways home and a stopwatch. We should have gone every way home multiple times, timing it every time so we would know definitively at the end of however long which way home was faster. However, we went to public school in Florida. We did not know about the scientific method as much as we knew about like the Scooby-Doo method. So we split up. And before we did, my brother laid down one ground rule. He said, to make it fair, don't run. Pretty fair rule, pretty simple rule. There's one thing that rule has in common with the Confederacy. My brother turned the corner, I took off full sprint. I turned around, I ran back to the school, past all the classrooms, out into the recess field, and I jumped the brick wall that separated the school from the cemetery. And I should explain that. It wasn't the school cemetery? That feels like a good start. It did make the alligator evasion drills fun. For sure. Because some days we'd be slacking, you know, and teachers would see it, and they'd be like, oh, you want to play it that way? That's fine. Zigzag or body bag? Pick one! If you didn't laugh at that, you're wrong. That's very funny. So at this point in the story, I am in a cemetery. A child, backpack on, middle of the day, alone, in a cemetery. I looked like Dora the Explorer about to do a special on Dia de los Muertos. Like at any moment I was gonna stop and look up at the camera and go, hola! Can you help me find the gravestone of Swiper the Fox? I told that bitch you take a swipe, you get the knife, and he didn't listen. I know at this point in my journey home, I'm gonna beat my brother home. He would never take the shortcut to the cemetery. He had what he called respect for the dead. I called it a fear of ghosts. And I did not have one. I'll bite a ghost's ankle. I don't give a fuck. I get home maybe 10 minutes before my brother does. At this point, I just gotta look inconspicuous. So I I do not take my backpack off. I do not wipe the sweat from my brow. I go through 6 pouches of Capri Sun. I turn on SpongeBob. That was it. My dad walked in, assessed the situation, looked at me and said, "Hey, where's your brother?" And then I said to him, just as Cain once said to God himself, "I didn't kill him." And my dad said, "Okay," and walked out. 10 minutes later, my brother comes around the corner. They make eye contact. My dad looks at him and goes, "Hey, where's your brother?" My brother goes, "Well, fuck." We were both grounded. Sent to our room. Our dad just told us to go in there, be quiet until he found a better punishment for us. And we go in. We had bunk beds at the time. My brother was on the bottom bunk because he was older than me, and I was on the top bunk because I was easier to throw. And we were just sitting there quiet. Maybe 5, 6, 7 minutes goes by of quiet. Then my brother loses it, and he starts kicking my bunk from the bottom and yelling mean things at me like, "You big dumb dummy," which we were 8 and 9, so that hurt. And he would yell like, "You big dumb dummy, you got us both in trouble, you idiot. I hope you learned something, stupid." And he's kicking me and kicking me. I'm just up there holding on. Because I don't know if any of you have been in the top bunk while somebody's having a tantrum beneath you. But all you really can do is hold on and hope you do it a bit better than Jack and Rose. You know? Oh, I'm sorry, was that the line? The fictional deaths of 2 characters from James Cameron's hit Titanic. That's where it's gonna get worse. So I'm hanging on. My brother goes 5, 6 minutes, and he stops, and I wait for it to get dead quiet in the room again. As soon as it does, I poked my head over the side of the bed, and I looked down at him, and I said, "You know what? I did learn something today. My way is faster." And then he murdered me. Cindy took notes through that story. And afterwards she said, "I just have one question. I just want to clarify one quick thing. Your father was just home on like a random Tuesday afternoon?" And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know he was on fucking trial right now, Cindy. If I knew I needed to bring an alibi for my dad from 2002, I would have brought one." And she said, "Oh, I'm sorry. We'll move on. We'll move past. We'll jump ahead. Tell me about the move. How do you like LA? How do you like living out here? Have you made any friends?" And I was like, "Yeah, no. One of my best friends out here is he's a guy named Lonnie Marts. And some of you guys might actually know Lonnie Marts. He's Lonnie IIV online. He was really popular on TikTok during the pandemic. He was the black guy that was doing like God and Gabriel making animals. Yeah. He's one of my best friends. He's a ball of joy and sunshine and energy. He's always really fun to be around. He's a hoot and a half of a human being. First time I met him, I thought he was stupid, but I'm glad you laughed at that. Because that means you know which one of us was. That's what that means. To drive home that point, the first time I met Lonnie was not the first time Lonnie met me. We went to college together in Daytona Beach, Florida, a school of only 6,000. In my defense, we did not know each other in college. We found out years later when we became friends, we were just sharing stories back and forth. And one of us told a story and the other one went, "I was there for that." It was a very confusing discovery for us. I told Lonnie this story and he said, "That was you? That's why I didn't talk to you." And I don't blame him. Here's what happened. So we were playing intramural flag football. We were both on the field warming up before the game began. And while we were there, I noticed there was like a gaggle of children starting to surround a something. And I was a very curious lad, so I joined the gaggle. and I noticed they were surrounding a snake. And being a native Floridian, I recognized that snake immediately. There is something you all need to know about what it's like to go to college in Florida, especially if you're from out of state. The freshman orientation class in Florida is not bullshit. It is a 6-week survival course. You will need all 6 weeks. And if you miss a lesson, you might miss the rest of your life. Basically how it works is we don't have 6 weeks to go over the whole course. I'm going to give you as many crash courses so you can catch up as possible. You're going to walk in, there's going to be a guy at the front with a PowerPoint presentation of pictures of things that can kill you. It's going to be a long PowerPoint. And he's going to start going, don't touch that, don't touch that, spit that out, don't touch that. Basically what this lesson is, as fast as I can give it, you're going to walk in, you're going to sit down, this guy's going to go, okay, if it can kill you, it lives in Florida. If it lives in Florida, it can kill you. Florida is the rectangle that is also a square. Furthermore, there is an alligator that lives behind the cafeteria. His name is Fred. Please do not feed Fred. You're laughing. I told you there was an alligator that lived behind the cafeteria. And you're laughing. It was on the syllabus. It was the first thing on bold, underlined, italicized, surrounded by exclamation points and asterisks. There is an alligator that lives behind the cafeteria. His name is Fred. Please do not feed Fred. You know what wasn't on the syllabus? The number for animal control. They didn't say if you see him, call someone. They said if you see him, get the fuck out of his living room. My college career began with a land acknowledgement for a fucking dinosaur. And you're laughing? Fred loves French fries, by the way. He was a good boy. So anyway, I joined the gaggle. I recognize the snake. I say, hey, that's a water moccasin. Recognition is good. If you don't know what a water moccasin is, the less colloquial name for it is a cottonmouth. More recognition is good. If you don't know what a cottonmouth is, it's a snake. And if it bites you, you might not die. You might wish. So I say, hey, that's a water moccasin. They all remembered their training from freshman orientation. They acted accordingly. They went, nope. And then I reached for the snake. At this point, there was a security guard nearby that decided now would be a really good time to like secure the guard or something. So he took a step forward and put his hand on his holster as if that would help anyone ever, you know? And he goes, please do not touch the snake. It's very poisonous. And I said, no, it's venomous, actually. And he did not like that. He went, okay, don't touch it. And I said, fine, get me a stick. And he said, don't fucking poke it. And I said, what do you want me to do? Get down all fours, start yelling obscenities at it? And he was like, no! So I got down all fours. I started yelling obscenities at the snake. I was like, get the fuck off the field, snake. We're playing football. You ain't got no hands. You're useless out there. I'm like nose to nose with this snake. He's looking back at me like, for some reason, I feel like this child already has an antivenom. And I did. Doesn't matter why. Eventually, I get him to slither off the field. I stand up, triumphant. I turn around. There's still just a gaggle of children staring at me. And I wanted to believe in that moment, they were all looking at me like, whoa, Steve Irwin. But I know in my heart, they were all looking at me like, oh, Harry Potter? And that's why Lonnie didn't talk to me for a few years. Cindy had questions after that one. Her first question was, did parents like you? Which I felt was a bit accusatory. But parents loved me. They did. I was a real mature kid, and I don't want that to be misconstrued with like a polite kid, because a polite kid, they'll say yes sir, no ma'am, thank you, all that stuff. They won't touch your stuff if you don't let them, you know. I wasn't that. I was a mature kid, which meant like I learned how to build a motorcycle when I was 8 years old. I would help adults find the best way to ask their bosses for raises. If I was allowed to have had a credit card at 8 years old and my father didn't already have one out in my name, then I would... Whoops. If you don't get that one, good for you. I just would have had really good credit for an 8-year-old. That's all I'm saying, you know? And so parents love having me around because they thought I would be like a really good influence on their kids, and then their kids would start acting a little bit more grown up. And then Cindy just took notes. I was in the military for 6 years. I've been in front of a lot of panels and a lot of boards that are filled with the people that can ruin your career, if not your entire life. I've never felt more nervous than when Cindy just took notes. I said I was a mature kid and parents loved having me around, and then she scribbled, and I went, "What you doing? What are you writing? You don't have to write anything, because because that's not like a red flag, so I don't even know." And she said, "Not in isolation." Okay. So this is where the therapy starts. Got it. All right. She said, "I just have a couple questions about the snake story, just some clarification things. My first question is, how old were the other students on the field with you?" And I said, "Well, it was my freshman year, so I was 17 or 18, and so they were either, you know, my age or older." And then she said, "Okay, you called them children." I said, "That is a storytelling device. That's what that is. That is not a red flag." And she said, "Not in isolation." Cool. And then she said, "I just want to try to make sure I have all of the facts straight. Kind of what appears to me is that you walked onto the field and you joined the students and you assessed the situation, and then you appointed yourself the adult." No. I was already an adult. I was 17. I had been for like 5 years at that point. And she said, "That one is a red flag." And after a minute, she thought about it and she said, "Have you ever thought that maybe the reason you thought Lonnie was stupid when you first met him is actually because he was 25 and acted like it?" No. And she said, "No, you haven't thought about it," or "No, that isn't the case." And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Look, it's nothing to be ashamed of. This is a common enough experience that even with the little bit of information you've given me about yourself, I'm able to make some inferences. Sometimes what happens when children are forced to grow up faster than they otherwise would on their own, they can start to see themselves as older than they are and see their peers as younger than they are, and they can sometimes develop a sort of bitterness or resentment and conflate the ideas of immaturity and stupidity." I said, "Cindy, if I had pearls..." It's like, here's the thing. I did not want to believe her in that moment, because even in that moment, I still thought of myself as being a fairly childish and silly person, you know? Like, in my head, I still like to go fast, you know? And so I also like pranks. There's nothing more childish than a prank. So at that point I started thinking, I'm like, okay, well, if I can just remember the last time that I pulled a prank on somebody, I can tell her that story and we can start undoing this whole narrative. And I started thinking about it, and then I had to keep thinking about it. Because it had been like 6 years, which is too long. So I did not tell her. And I do feel like it is good to just kind of pause here to let you guys know. When I say I like pranks, I don't mean the pranks that hurt people. I just want to mildly inconvenience you. Like, I don't want you guys to hate me for this. This is just like the energy that we're operating on, okay? If I ever pulled up next to you at a red light, I would try to get you to roll your window down, and as soon as you did, I would roll mine back up. That's where we're at, okay? I am childish. The best prank I ever pulled, I actually got 87 people in trouble all at one time. And I'm way too proud of it. So there's two pieces of context here for the story. One, this took place as part of a field training exercise that I did with the military. And two, I'm pretty good at voices. And by that, I mean I can do things like,
oh boy. If you don't buy Disney Plus right now, I'll fucking kill you.
So a couple years into my contract with the Army sent me and 8 other people from my unit out to the Mojave Desert to support a much bigger unit in their field training exercise. When we get out there, we're greeted by their first sergeant, who's the guy in charge. He was a very nice guy to us. We were not his soldiers. And he had a very distinct voice. And I remember thinking, yeah, I can do that one. And I was right. So I practiced his voice for like 4 days. And I need to let you guys know right now, I was not originally intending on using my powers for evil. I just wanted to do silly stuff like come around a corner every so often and be like, hey, what are you doing? And they go, you know, silly stuff. But you all know how plans change, right? Because after 4 days, it became very apparent to me that me and my 8 friends were doing like most of the work. And the 87 of them that we were there to support were doing like none of the, almost to an impressive degree. And after 4 days of working 12 to 16 hours outside in the summer in the desert, you start to get a little pissed. I'm telling you all this right now so that you know whatever's about to happen in this story, you're on my side. We went to sleep night 4, woke up day 5 the same way we did every single day. Their first sergeant got up early, got dressed, ready for the day. Right before he would walk outside, he would turn around this open bay and just start yelling, "Wake up! Everybody wake up! It's time to get up!" And then he would leave. Day 5, door closed behind him. I stood up and yelled, "Go back to sleep! Everybody go back to sleep! 1 more hour!" And then they did. I know, someone turned the lights back off. It was me, and they all went back to sleep. Except for me, the 8 people I came with who stood around looking at each other as if to say, there's no fucking way that just worked. And someone goes, "Should we wake them up?" And I said, "Don't you dare. This is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. We will play it as it lies." So the 9 of us got dressed in the pitch black at like 5 in the morning, walk outside. An hour later, their first sergeant comes back, opens the door, finds his entire unit still asleep an hour after he told them all to wake up. And then the 9 of us stood back and watched as 87 grown men in just their underwear were forced to do lunges across the Mojave Desert. That joke will get me murdered one day. I told that story to a lot of people because it's objectively very funny. And everybody I told that story to laughed because it's objectively very funny. Except, there's one guy. He was older than me. I respected him. He was in my chain of command. And when I told him the story, he did not laugh. And instead he said, "Brainard, there's a time and place for everything." That was that field training exercise you were taking part in is a combat readiness exercise. It's meant to test to see if a unit is ready and available to be deployed to active wartime. If that were an actual active wartime drill, you would have gotten a lot of people very seriously injured. And then I started feeling bad for having done it, which sucks. Because it's objectively very funny. But that became sort of a recurring theme in my life. Anytime that I did anything that might be perceivably immature by someone older than me, then I would feel guilty for having done it. It was sort of like being Catholic without having to go to church. Was that a little too close to home for some of you? Can't change it now. It got to the point where I just started policing myself. Like, anytime I was about to do something that I thought might be perceivably immature to someone older than me, then I would stop myself from doing it at all. And I remember one day, I was 22 years old, I was working at a food truck in Orlando, Florida, and the owner looked at me one day and said, "Hey Ben, you're a lot more mature than the other 20-something-year-olds I've had working on this truck." And that made me happy. I don't remember much of my childhood, but I remember that. What happened was I started acting mature all the time and stopping myself from being immature all the time. Eventually, I just started seeing myself as older than I was, which on the surface doesn't look like a red flag in isolation. Because on the surface, it just looks like a kid with like a really good work ethic. But the flip side of that coin is that that kid sees himself as older than he is, and he starts to see his peers as younger than they are. He starts to alienate and isolate himself from his peers and build a sort of bitterness and resentment towards them, conflating the ideas of stupidity and immaturity. When I was in basic, after about 7 or 8 weeks, the guy who slept on the bunk next to me, he was the big spoon most nights. His name was Berger. That's his real name, B-E-R-G-E-R. One morning we woke up and he looked at me and said, "Hey Brainard, I think I've diagnosed you." Which is a wild way to begin a conversation. I would have led with something more normal, like, I don't know, "Good morning. How are ya?" The classics, you know. But to his credit, I was intrigued. So I said, "Okay, I'll bite. What's up?" And he said, "First, I think it's important that you know I have a master's in family psychology." "Do ya?" And he said, "I think you have ADHD." And then I said, "You have a master's in family psychology? And you joined the army? And then he said the most poignant thing I have ever heard in my life. We all make mistakes. Followed up by going, furthermore, I think you are what we would classify as a hero child. And a hero child is one of the titles that we give to children of alcoholism, children of narcissism, or children of broken homes. The hero child specifically is categorized as being an overachiever, a kid who always strives to be the best, because they believe if they're good enough at everything they do, they can save the family name. And then I said, you have a master's in family psychology! After we got out of basic, Berger sent me some further reading on the subject, which is the nicest way that I can say he mailed a textbook to me. And I read about it, I read up on it, and I learned a lot about myself, which kind of hurts to say. I don't know if any of you guys have ever been reading a psych textbook and then started to recognize yourself in the pages. But that's not fun. That is not a main character you wish you could cosplay. That is not... I learned a lot about myself. I also learned, importantly, I think, that Berger was just therapizing me the entire time. I didn't realize to what extent until I met with Cindy for the first time, and she started one of the sessions by going, so what were you like as a child? And I had a flashback to running a 5K with Berger where he started the run by going, so what were you like as a child? And I was like, oh, I'm so glad you asked. I put lizards on my ears. I kind of like, after thinking about it a while, I realized that Berger diagnosed me partially based off of everything that I told him about my life, but I think more importantly, based off everything I told him about my life compared to all of the things I did not tell him about my life. That's a big disparity. This is everything Berger knew about me by the time I was 19 years old. When I was a junior in high school, I was in the Academy of Drafting Design at Seabreeze High School in Daytona Beach, Florida. At the end of the year, you get to take a draftsman certification test to see if you get a certificate to be a draftsman at any engineering firm across the country. I became the first junior in the history of that test to pass that test. I also passed it on my first try, so I became the first student, regardless of grade, to pass that test on their first try. Then I taught other students from my grade how to pass that test without cheating. And so 6, 7, or 8 other juniors also passed the test that year. And whenever the student passes, the school gets a big chunk of funding. So when I came back my senior year, the school had gotten a lot of funding. They spent all that money on 3D printers, which I then taught myself how to use and taught myself how to use the programs that made them operate. I started printing and selling 3D printed customizable phone cases to the student body for $10 a piece. I gave $5 of every sale back to the academy, which they saved up and bought another 3D printer that only I could use. Also, during my junior year, I applied to this thing called the Engineering Scholars Program at Embry-Riddle. Embry-Riddle is an aeronautical university in Daytona Beach, Florida. It's #1 in the country for aerospace engineering. It's top 5 in the country for undergraduate engineering as a whole. I was one of 30 students from the entire county to be accepted to this program. I was the only student from my high school to be accepted to this program, which meant the summer between my junior and senior years of high school, I got to go to actual Embry-Riddle and take 3 actual college classes at their campus as part of like a 6-week advanced summer program. So I took Engineering 101, Astrophysics 101, and Graphical Communications 120. I got an A in all 3 of them. When I applied to that college a few weeks later, I got accepted immediately, and they offered me a scholarship worth up to 50% of my tuition. And even though I'd already been accepted to college, I still had to go back and do my senior year of high school. So when I went back, I became the president of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, the president of the Academy of Drafting Design, and the president of the senior class. I played 3 sports, of which I was a captain of 2 of them, and I had 2 jobs. After high school, I went to college. I majored in mechanical engineering. I double minored in physics and computer design and manufacturing. And while I was there, I got bored, so I joined the Army. After about 2 weeks of basic, they send you out to the rifle range for the first time to qualify. While I was there, I memorized and wrote down the order in which the pop-up targets go in and how many seconds are in between each one. I shot 37 out of 40, and for the rest of the day, anytime someone from my platoon did not come back with a qualification score, I gave them my rifle, I followed them out onto the range, and I told them what target was about to pop up next, how many seconds I had to shoot it, and I reminded them to do things like, hey, steady breathing, steady trigger squeeze. Every single soldier from my platoon qualified the first day in the range. It was the first time in well over 2 years that something like that had happened. So they put me in charge of my platoon. I was the PG. I was the platoon guide. I was the leader of my platoon. From that day forward, my platoon won every single inter-platoon event for the entirety of basic training. So I won the leadership award because of that. And because I was shot 37 out of 40, I tied one of the other 144 soldiers in the company with a 37 out of 40, so we had to do a barrier shoot-off. The lieutenant colonel heard about it. He wanted to get involved. I outshot the lieutenant colonel. I won the top shot award. The final PT test was 2 minutes of push-ups, 2 minutes of sit-ups, and then a 2-mile run. I did more push-ups and more sit-ups than every other soldier out of 144 in the company, and I ran my 2 miles in about 11 minutes and 15 seconds, which is very fast for someone who's get on his toes to see over a lot of counters still. My final score on the PT test was 360 out of a possible 300 points. Second place got 305. So I won the top PT award as well. And so because I won the top PT award, the top shot award, and the leadership award, I also won the Distinguished Honor Graduate Award. So I won all 4 awards at basic training, and I finished just in time so I could go back home and take another semester of engineering. And that is everything Berger knew about me by the time I was 19 years old. Which is cool, but none of you paid to see an engineer tonight. So who did I do that for? Because it wasn't me. Truth is, I had a lot of shame about my family and where I came from, and so I believe that if I was just the best at everything that I did, then nobody would ever ask to see what was going on behind the curtain. And that developed into a sense of perfectionism that I live with to this day. Every morning I wake up with a constant fear that if I stop right now, it's all gonna end tomorrow. And that applies to everything, even like the idea of maturity. In my head, if you're mature, you're mature. That's it. As soon as you stop being mature, then you are no longer. Same thing with immaturity. In my head, I started believing that people could only be one thing. And because I needed to be mature all the time, and because I had a constant fear that if I stopped right now, it all ended tomorrow, I stopped myself from doing things like wanting to go fast for years. And I remember one day I was in therapy with Cindy, and she asked me if I had any stories about my dad because she wanted to try to connect some dots. And I said, I have a few, but not very many good ones. And if I'm being honest right now, I'm kind of terrified that I'm turning into my father. That shit will sneak up on you. A couple months ago, I caught myself admiring a lawn. Wasn't even mine. This is a real thing. I yelled at my aunt for touching the thermostat in her house. And now I can't stop saying some of the shit that my dad said all the time. If you don't know, all dads have catchphrases. If you think yours doesn't, just wait. One day you're gonna say some shit and be like, where the fuck did that come from? My dad likes to say the phrase, yeah, I still got it, after completing any mundane task. The last time I went to visit him while I was there, he made me a grilled cheese sandwich, as dads do, and when he flipped it, it was nice and golden brown on one side, and he looked up at me and smiled and went, yeah, I still got it. And I said, got what, Dad? This motion? Is this what we're proud of now? Man, that's not something. You should let me know when you don't got that anymore. That's way more pressing of an issue. That's when I gotta put you in a home. That's what that means. But he didn't care. He just kept saying the whole time I was there. He screwed in a light bulb. Yeah, I still got it. I walked by the bathroom. I heard a flush and a yeah, I still got it. I don't even want to know what the fuck it is he's still got in there. Problem is, I can't stop saying it now. I went for a walk in a park. There were two kids playing soccer. One of them kicked it, the other one missed it. It came to me. I stopped it. I kicked it back. That's it. And then I said out loud for the world to hear, yeah, I still got it. Got what, Ben? This motion? What the fuck? I'm not even old enough to have lost it yet. I'm fine. And I know those are very, very silly examples to give after saying something fairly heavy. But you got to remember, to me, people can't be two things. So whenever I start doing the silly shit that my dad did all the time, guess what my brain tells me is coming next? When I was 25, I was in the car with Lonnie. We were driving back from something, and we hit a little bit of traffic while we were sitting there. He turned the radio down, and he looked at me and said, "Hey, man, you're really mean." And I said, "No, I'm not." And he said, "Why do you think our friends only want to hang out with you when I'm also there?" And he didn't say that to hurt me. And I know he didn't, because he followed it up by saying, "Look, you're one of my best friends, and I love you, and I know you can be better." And that's the moment that broke me. Because everything I believed up to that point was that I was the mature one and Lonnie was the immature one. And that's how it was. But do you know how much maturity it takes, especially as a man, to sit down with your other male friend and say, "I love you, be better"? It's a lot. Especially since the other option is just way easier. The other option is to stop being my friend, which is probably what he should have done. But he didn't. Because he's stupid. That was the day I knew I needed to go to therapy. That was the day I started looking, because I think subconsciously I knew that Lonnie was probably the only piece of like consistent light or joy that I had in my life, and if I lost him, then I wouldn't have any at all. So I needed to do something to fix that and to save that. So I started going to therapy. And I came with the goal of allowing myself the space and the comfort to want to go fast again, or to want to still got it. Those are very silly ideas, but I spent so many years of my life trying to stop myself from wanting to do those things because those weren't who I needed to be. And I just wanted to be able to find a space and a comfort within myself to allow me to be me. And I've been in therapy now for about 3 years. And fuck, I wish it went faster, huh? I thought therapy would be a thing where I'd walk in, I would tell her what was wrong with me, and she'd be like, "Oh, do this." And I'd go, "You got it." But no, it's a lot more like paying someone to be really mean and specific to you. And after every hour, you go, "Aren't we done?" And then she goes, "We'll see you next week." And look, I don't want to discourage any of you if you've been thinking about starting therapy or if you've just begun therapy. I actually want to encourage you. I think it's a great decision. It's probably the best thing that I've ever done with my life. It's saved so many relationships in my life. And I want to give you some advice. The best piece of advice that I can give you is to write down, remember, and celebrate the moments that make you go, "Oh, I would have acted differently before." Because those moments are the moments that make you continue going. Those are the moments that make it worth it. They might be few and far between, especially at the beginning, but they're worth it. And I want to leave you guys with this story. It's my favorite moment that I like to remember and celebrate. I was flying from Los Angeles to Orlando, and I had a connecting flight in Chicago. And when I was coming down to Chicago, I got a text from United that said, "Hey, your connecting flight to Orlando has been canceled due to severe weather. Furthermore, we do not recommend you fly out at all tonight for safety reasons." And this is one of those moments I realized I wasn't actually turning into my dad, because my dad is a panicker. If anything marginally inconvenient goes wrong with the plan, he does not know how to proceed. And I'm not like that at all. The plan cannot go wrong if you do not make a plan. I got that text from United. My first response genuinely was, that's fine. I'll stay in Chicago for the night. I'll fly out tomorrow. What's the worst that could happen? And then the pilot came on, and he said, the current temperature in Chicago, Illinois is 10 degrees and dropping. It was 3 p.m. Every ounce of Florida in my body came out, and I yelled on a plane, I gotta get out of here right now! We touched down, I ran to the customer service desk, I was like, home, please. And she said, did you check a bag? And I said, yes, I did. And she said, well, then I can't connect you. And I said, like hell you can. And she said, your bag might not end up where you do. And I said, that's fine, it's just clothes in there. I'm from Florida, we don't need those. And she said, Florida. Is Jacksonville okay? Jacksonville was about 2.5 hours away from where I needed to be. However, it was warmer. So I said, yup. And she said, okay, type. And then she stopped and she looked me up and down and went, you're good, you can make it. I said, excuse me, make what? A fucking wish? What are we doing here? And she said, this flight leaves in 6 minutes. Run. So I took off at I turned around, I hurdled the stanchion behind the customer service desk. She's just yelling directions at me from behind the desk like I'm Charlie in the goddamn chocolate factory. She's just back there going, run home, Charlie, you have the golden ticket. Gate C2, Charlie, don't stop for anything. And I'm running. First obstacle I came across was like 2 flights of escalators. I must have thought at that point I was like the end of Ferris Bueller's Day Off or something, because I tried to slide down the banister of them. Don't do that. They're rubber. You'll stick. You'll fall. I rolled down 2 flights of escalators, which in hindsight probably saved me some time. I popped back up like I meant to do it, and then I hit a moving walkway, and I yelled out loud as if it would help, super speed! And I know it didn't help. I know that. But I swear to God, for like 5 seconds, Usain Bolt was the second fastest man alive. I get to the end of the corridor, I look up, I see gate C20 in front of me. I need to be at gate C2 in the next 5 minutes. I look to my right, I look to my left, I see gate C2 down at the end of the terminal. I take off for a full sprint. At this point in my life, nothing is getting in my way. I start stiff-arming children to the ground. I hurdle a park bench in the air. Why do we have park benches in it? We don't have time for this. I hurdled a park bench. I shoulder-checked an old woman just for the adrenaline. Do you understand? I look up, I see gate C2, and there's just one woman standing there slowly closing the door to the jet bridge. And I know in my heart, I'm going to have to Indiana Jones this shit. So now I'm running at her full speed, screaming at the top of my lungs, toot-toot-toot-toot! Toot-toot-toot! And she stops and looks up at me, terrified. And she says, are you Brainard? And I said, yeah. And she said, you just made it. I said, that's actually a pretty anticlimactic way of ending this. Did I fight you for it? And she said, no, get on the plane. I said, okay, yeah. I got on the plane, I sat down in my seat, and I buckled up, I rested my head against the window, and I thought to myself, home stretch. And that's when I realized the woman seated next to me on the plane was a plane talker. I know. I'm a plane sleeper. She is my mortal enemy. I sit down, buckle up, rest my head against the window, and I think to myself, home stretch. And then I see, entering my periphery, her head, sideways, like a fucking cartoon character. And she says, "Hey, why are you sweating?" What a wild way to begin a conversation. I would have led with something way more normal, like, I don't know, "Hey, I think I've diagnosed you." At this point, I have a decision to make. Do I continue my path of healing and be nice to this woman? Or do I let her know she's made a mistake? And it is important to me that you all know healing is non-linear. So I looked at her and I said, "Hey, shut the fuck up." Am I proud of it? A little bit. It worked. I'm a better person now. It's been like 2.5 years, but it worked. We take off. We have to go up through a snowstorm, and we hit the turbulence of the snowstorm, and at this point I realized that plane talker, not a good flyer. She has grabbed onto the armrests of her chair, and she started to lose a little bit of color in her face, and I actively did nothing to help. I may have made it worse. I started watching Big on my phone, but not holding it. I put it on the tray table, let it slide back and forth. We go through the whole flight. As we're coming down into Jacksonville, something I did not say at the beginning of the story, in Jacksonville, Florida, at the time of this flight, severe thunderstorms. Classic Jacksonville. I'm not worried about thunderstorms. I'm a very experienced, very well-traveled traveler, and I'm also aware that planes are built to withstand lightning strikes. Like, planes get struck by lightning all the time, and you never even feel it because they're just built different. So thunderstorms don't bother me. If it was a hurricane, we'd have to dodge the bullets, and that's way harder, So we're coming down into the thunderstorm. We hit the turbulence. It's way heavier than the snowstorm was. And I look over, and Plane Talker has once again grabbed onto the armrest of her chair as if that would help. And she has lost all of the color in her face. And I know if I don't do something now, then she might achieve medical emergency. And so I said the first thing to her that I could think of to help, which was, "Hey, why are you sweating?" Got her back, baby! Oh, yeah! You gotta wake up real early to get one past me. She had murder in her eyes. We touched down, I ran off that plane. I ran into the men's restroom in the Jacksonville airport because I thought, she can't follow me here. Not in Florida legally, anyway. And while I was in there, I was just thinking about how crazy of a day that had been, because that day started at LAX at 6 a.m., which is a time and a place where you think to yourself, it can only get better from here. I checked my bag at the gate because I thought it might be nice to those around me who didn't pack as well as I did. My flight gets rerouted from Dallas to Chicago. I have to go talk to a customer service representative. I have to hurdle a stanchion. I have to roll down 2 flights of escalators. I have to hit a moving walkway. I have to stiff-arm children. I have to hurdle a park bench. Why do we have park? We don't have time for this. I had to hurdle a park bench. I had to shoulder check an old woman just for the adrenaline. Do you even understand it? Even after all that, I had to fight an airline attendant to even get on the flight. No, I didn't, but I won't stop saying that I did. I sat down, buckled up, rested my head against the window, thought to myself, home stretch, and then I got sat next to the nosiest bitch in the world. We go up through a snowstorm, I watch all of Big, down into a thunderstorm, and even after all of that, I still had the mental fortitude and the presence of mind to absolutely roast that bitch in the next Friday. That's when I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, yeah, I still got it. But now I'm in Jacksonville. I don't want to be here. I start calling friends, family, anybody that I thought might be around to come pick me up from the Jacksonville International Airport at midnight. And eventually someone does come. Who else? Lonnie Marts. His family's from Jacksonville. He was in town. He came to pick me up. And I told him the same story that I just told all of you. And he laughed at me. He laughed at me. And then he said, you know, if you had just stayed in Chicago for the night, the airline would have paid for your hotel, they would have paid for your meal, and they would have rebooked you on the next flight out to Orlando, where you are supposed to be right now. And I said, oh, I know. But my way was faster. Thank you guys so much. Lonnie Marts, everyone!
Hey, thank you guys for laughing at my friend's jokes. It makes him feel real good. This is great. Made me proud.